Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves on a quiet little island in the Aegean Sea, where the breeze is so soft it might as well be a sigh, and the vines seem to be listening in on your thoughts. The sand is warm beneath your toes, the kind of warm that makes you wonder if time's even working properly. You can hear the gulls overhead, but they're not squawking, they're just kind of existing. And tucked behind a row of lazy fig trees, there's a very bored-looking minor god messing around with some grapes. His name, Dionysus. Yes, the Dionysus. Except right now, he's not wearing a crown or throwing festivals. He's mostly wondering what happens if you leave fruit in the sun for too long. You probably won't survive this, if only because the sheer drowsiness of this tale might actually pull you into sleep before Dionysus ever gets around to doing anything useful. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is right now, because there's something oddly magical about knowing we're all getting sleepy together now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The vines are everywhere. They're drooping over crumbled ruins, snaking through piles of unwashed robes, and curling lazily around your ankles. Dionysus sits in the shade of a rock shaped sort of like a lion if you squint and maybe tilt your head. He's picking grapes, one by one, and dropping them into a clay bowl with the enthusiasm of someone halfway through a very boring dream. You crouch nearby, and for a while the only sound is the gentle plop, plop, plop of grapes. Eventually, Dionysus sighs, the kind of sigh that belongs in an overly dramatic stage play. Why do grapes exist? He mutters, if not to become wine. You're not sure if he's asking you, or the bowl, or the universe. But he's clearly annoyed. His robe is stained, his hair is full of leaves, and there's a sticky purple handprint on his cheek. You wonder if he even remembers he's a god. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was always meant to be the god of wine, or if he kind of just fell into it after one too many questionable experiments with fermented figs. You're leaning toward the latter. The sun lazily makes its way toward the horizon, painting the sea in streaks of gold and lavender. Somewhere in the distance, a tortoise trudges across the sand, looking almost insulted by the idea of movement. Dionysus throws a grape at it. The tortoise does not react. Even the tortoise judges me. He groans. Here's a mainstream historical fact while we're here. In some older versions of Greek mythology, Dionysus wasn't just the god of wine. He was also linked to madness, theater, and even rebirth, which is kind of a lot for one guy, especially one who's currently attempting to squish grapes between his toes, without any real purpose. The squishing continues. It's not elegant. There's no ceremony. Just a floppy god using his heel to mash grapes into what might generously be called proto-juice. Some of it gets on your leg. You try not to flinch down now. A quirky little detail the historians don't always mention. Ancient Greeks occasionally used woven goat hair to filter grape juice. Dionysus, unfortunately, appears to be using a sock. It's unclear if it's his. You sit there for a while, watching the god of revelry forget how to revel. He's not throwing a party. He's not conjuring fire, or summoning maenads, or riding a leopard. He's just quietly squashing fruit. Eventually, He looks up. You ever wonder if wine is just juice with a superiority complex? You don't answer. You're not sure you're even supposed to. The vines rustle softly as the wind picks up, carrying with it the sleepy scent of thyme, old leather, and very old socks. Dionysus wrinkles his nose. I think the juice is judging me now. A bee lands on the edge of the bowl. It doesn't drink. It just sits there, as if waiting for something momentous to happen. You both stare at it. Then, with the dramatic flair of someone who's about to do something only mildly interesting but feels the need to act like it's epic, Dionysus lifts the bowl. He sniffs it. He swirls it around like a sommelier who has absolutely no qualifications. Then he sips and spits. Ugh, it's just sweet sadness. The bee buzzes off, unimpressed. This is where it all might have ended. Just a weird island afternoon with a sticky god and some aggressively average grape juice. But of course, the universe wasn't done playing with Dionysus just yet. Not even close. You hear it before you see it. The soft, slow slosh of waves against the hull, a creaking, a muttered curse carried on the wind. Several someones are approaching. And Dionysus, with his juice-stained hands and grape-splotched knees, suddenly looks like a kid caught playing with his food. You stand, you squint toward the horizon. And sure enough, a boat is limping toward shore. It's barely holding together, stitched with rope and sheer optimism. On board, a gaggle of sunburnt sailors who look like they've just lost a debate with a squid. Visitors, Dionysus says, straightening up and immediately tripping over his own foot. Do I look divine? Be honest. No. Okay, great. The grape juice sloshes in the bowl. The wind hums in your ears. The tortoise blinks once, like it knows something you don't. The boat bumps onto the sand. The sailors jump off, arguing about dried figs versus olives and whether raisins are just failed grapes. Dionysus hides the bowl behind his back like a teenager caught with a forbidden scroll. And just like that, history is about to take a weird, sleepy turn. You don't know it yet, but this is the moment grape juice begins its slow, accidental rise to mythological fame. The sailors are a mess. They stumble off the boat like half-cooked spaghetti, sandal-blistered, and arguing over whose idea it was to take the shortcut through Poseidon's bad mood. One of them immediately sits down and begins peeling an orange with the kind of focus usually reserved for sacred rituals or really good gossip. Another is muttering something about raisins being a conspiracy. You glance at Dionysus. He's still got the bowl of grape mush hidden awkwardly behind his back, standing with all the dignity of a teenager holding a juice box at a wine tasting. One sailor, balding, broad-shouldered, and wearing a belt made entirely of fish bones, notices. You both, oh hey there, he says, wiping his forehead with a scrap of seaweed. You live here, because we're lost. Very, very lost. Like accidentally circumnavigated to islands, and maybe time itself lost. Dionysus steps forward, attempting what might be a casual pose, but mostly looks like a grape-covered flamingo. Welcome, mortals, he announces with unnecessary flourish. I am Dennis, just Dennis, local vine enthusiast. Historians still argue whether Dionysus often used fake names when mingling with mortals, or if he just regularly forgot his own identity. Either way, you nod supportively. Sure, Dennis. The sailor narrows his eyes. Dennis, huh? You got any food or drink, or like a blanket that doesn't smell like feet? At the mention of drink, Dionysus lights up like someone who's just remembered he left cookies in the oven. He yanks the bowl from behind his back with a grape-splattered flourish. Drink, yes. Behold my latest invention. A non-alcoholic grape elixir. No hangover, no regrets. Just juice. There's a long pause. The sailors look at the bowl, then at Dionysus, then back at the bowl. One of them leans over and sniffs it. Smells like someone lost a fruit fight. Another dips a finger in, tastes it, and shrugs. Actually, not bad. Kind of sweet. Like if sadness tried its best. The others crowd around. Soon, the bowl is passed from hand to calloused hand, and the grape juice disappears faster than you'd expect. Dionysus watches with the anxious pride of a first-time baker, waiting for someone to pretend to like their soggy scones. Do you like it? He asks. One sailor wipes his mouth and gives a half nod. Yeah, it's decent. Definitely juice. Doesn't burn like wine. No dizzy feeling. My teeth don't feel like they're trying to escape my skull. Dionysus beams. Somewhere in the fig trees, the tortoise turns away slowly, as if it can't watch this unfold. A little while later, the sailors settle under the shade, chewing bits of dried squid and swapping stories about cursed seashells and haunted wind. One guy claims he saw a nymph who turned into a duck mid-sentence. Another insists that dolphins are spies sent by Apollo. Meanwhile, Dionysus paces back and forth, muttering to himself. They liked it, not loved, but liked. That's something, that's progress. He picks up another bunch of grapes, examining them like they've betrayed him. Maybe I added too much sunlight. He plops down beside you, wiping his sticky fingers on what might be your blanket. You ever think maybe I peaked too early? Like back when I invented wine, people cared. There was drama, festivals, singing, fire breathers, leopard chariots. Now I make juice and get a meh in return. You open your mouth to answer, but he's already on to his next spiral. I mean mortals. Always complaining wine is too strong makes them do stupid things. So I give them grape juice. And what? Mild approval. Not even a celebratory yawn. You pat his arm. He sighs again, longer this time, like he's auditioning for the role of dramatic breeze number 3 in a local theater production. Here's your historical tidbit of the night. Ancient Greeks often diluted wine with water as much as 1:4 because drinking it straight was considered barbaric. The concept of drinking plain grape juice, however, was mostly reserved for kids, the sick, or those unironically trying to be wholesome. Dionysus, unfortunately, has no idea about this and is currently contemplating inventing sparkling juice by shaking it really hard. The sun starts to dip lower, casting a sleepy glow across the beach. One of the sailors is braiding seaweed into his beard. Another is snoring gently into a sack of lentils. The grape juice seems to have done its job. No brawling, no awkward love poems, and no one trying to marry a seagull. Dionysus notices too. Huh, he muses. There.com. He watches them a moment longer, then raises a finger. Wait, no one's arguing, no one's crying. No one's doing that thing where they swear they can wrestle a bear. Is this peace? You nod. He stares into the now empty bowl, as if expecting it to whisper secrets back. Then he leans over to you. maybe I've stumbled onto something here. Not wine, not water, something in between. Grape. Diplomacy, you're not sure that's a term, but you let it slide at this point. Another mild curiosity pops up. One sailor has started painting his shield using crushed grapes and driftwood ash. It smells weird, looks worse, and might be the first known instance of grape-based visual art. He calls it Juice Warrior, and you pretend to be impressed. Tomorrow Dionysus says, I'll try adding a bit of honey, or mint, maybe. Even lightning, if Zeus lets me borrow some. He leans back in the sand, eyes closed. Arms spread out like he's trying to soak up the last light of the day through his fingertips. You think they'll write myths about this, he murmurs. The breeze rustles through the vines. The tortoise is now using a vine as a pillow. Probably not, you think. But stranger things have happened. And as the stars begin to poke through the deepening sky, you realize something. This weird little island, with its juice-obsessed god and shipwrecked snack critics, might just be the calmest place in the entire mythological universe. No battles, no monsters. Just sticky hands and slightly fermented dreams. Morning sneaks in like it's afraid to be too loud. The sky slips from navy to lavender. The waves hum politely against the shore. And dew gathers on the grapevines in tiny, glittering globes. You stretch out on a patch of sand that somehow feels softer than it should, like the earth itself has decided you deserve a break. Dionysus is already up technically. He's lying upside down on a boulder, legs in the air, squinting at a cluster of grapes dangling inches from his face. He looks like a philosopher stuck in a yoga pose. Okay, he mutters to no one. So grapes, right. Clearly underappreciated. But maybe the problem is squishing. You sit up, brushing sand from your hair, just in time to see him roll off the rock and land with an unceremonious oof. He pops up instantly, unbothered. We need a better method. Something refined. Something elegant. Something that doesn't involve my toes. He marches off toward the grove, where the vines have started growing with suspicious enthusiasm, curling around rocks and forming cozy grape hammocks. Dionysus grabs a wooden bucket, dumps out whatever was in it, probably olives, maybe regrets, and starts plucking grapes by the handful. You follow him into the grove, which smells like crushed sunlight and leaf sap. There's a sleepy kind of buzzing in the air, not just bees, but some kind of slow-breathing magic that seems to settle in your bones. Everything feels slightly unreal, like you've wandered into a dream where nothing bad happens and the worst mistake is adding too much time. This time, Dionysus doesn't stomp the grapes. He sits cross-legged on the ground, rolls up his sleeves, one of which is definitely just a piece of curtain, and begins pressing grapes between his fingers with the focus of a monk decoding secret scrolls. You see, he says, juice dribbling down his wrist. Grape juice needs care, patience, intention, like a song, or a mediocre romantic poem, or a well-balanced hummus. You nod, sure. Obviously, and here's a historical fact to go with your slowly ripening morning in ancient Greek households. Wine presses were often communal affairs, big, carved stone basins where people would stomp grapes together, often while singing. It was messy, smelly, and probably someone's idea of a good time. Grape juice, by contrast, was rarely a standalone affair. If it didn't ferment, it wasn't useful. So in that sense, Dionysus really is off-script, as the juice collects in the bottom of the bucket. A thought strikes him. Maybe it's not just the drink. Maybe it's the experience, the setting, the vibe. He gestures vaguely to the trees. A breeze flutters by in response, either encouragement or sarcasm. You spend the next little while helping him gather more grapes. Well, you try. One vine slaps you in the face. Twice, Dionysus tells it to behave. It DOESN, single quotes. Soon, you've got 2 buckets of gently pressed grape juice. A stack of questionably clean cups made from halved coconuts. And a god who's now wearing a crown of basil leaves and calling himself Dennis the Juice Whisperer. Just as you're wondering how this could possibly get more ridiculous, the sailors return. They look better today. Less sunburned, fewer arguments. One of them even waves. Another is carrying a fish wrapped in wildflowers, which he insists is a gift for the juice god. No one questions it. Dionysus puffs up. Ah, welcome back, my grateful followers. Behold version 2. He hands out the coconut cups, filled with the freshly pressed juice. The sailors sip, pause, sip again. One of them actually gives a small, sleepy smile. It's smoother, less like drinking a sticky apology. Kind of floral is that basil. Dionysus beams like someone just complimented his toga. Yes, yes. You taste the vineyard. You feel the sun. You inhale the dreams of the vine. A sailor nearby belches softly, tastes purple. You drift a bit from the scene, sitting under a fig tree and watching the world unfold around you in a haze of sweet-smelling calm. The sailors are lounging. Dionysus is floating ideas like juice festivals and grape sommeliers and lemon counter-programming. A beetle walks across your foot, pauses, and keeps going like it's too relaxed to bite. And now, a curious little detail for your sleepy collection. In some fringe traditions, Dionysus wasn't just tied to wine and madness, but also to agriculture. In general, some whispered that he had a secret role in taming wild plants, coaxing vines into cooperation, teaching humans how to tend the earth with something gentler than fire or steel. You look at him now, sticky hands cradling a coconut cup, and think, yeah, that tracks, of course. Not everyone's convinced. One of the sailors, big guy, thick neck, suspicious mustaches, steps forward. So wait, you're telling me this is supposed to replace wine? Dionysus blinks. Not replace, enhance, coexist with, like sandals and boots. Both useful, different moods. The sailor squints, but it doesn't get you drunk. Dionysus gestures grandly. Exactly, it gets you thoughtful, calm, clean of mind. You ever drifted through a field after 2 cups of this stuff? It's like walking through a poem. Mustache man does not look convinced. Sounds like something Apollo would say. Dionysus gasps, how dare, then immediately stops himself and takes a breath. No, you're right. This is not for everyone. This is for the discerning, the sleepy, the mellow and untroubled. You make a mental note that this entire experience may qualify as the first ever juice-based branding campaign. The day drifts on. More juice is made, more coconut cups are filled. Someone invents a drinking game that involves pointing at clouds that resemble historical figures. You lose. Everything looks like a melon to you, and by the time the sun begins to sink again, The island is coated in a dreamy stillness that feels both ancient and brand new. You glance at Dionysus. He's lying in a hammock made of vines, swirling juice. In a cracked cup, humming to himself. You can just make out the words, "O grave, glorio sticky muse, you leave no bruises, only snooze." Not exactly Homer, but the vibe is perfect. By the third day, the island has achieved peak juice-based serenity. You wake up to the sound of gentle sloshing. Dionysus, already up, is stirring a giant vat of grape juice with what looks like a ceremonial ladle made from driftwood and hubris. A nearby bird chirps in sleepy approval, then poops on a leaf and flies off. Balance, as always, is key. "Morning," Dionysus whispers, as if afraid to wake the juice. "Today is a big day." You squint. "Bigger than yesterday." "Much bigger," he says, eyes gleaming. "Today, we go bubbly." "Yep, this is happening." Sparkling juice, taut. He gestures toward an odd contraption near the grove, a mess of woven vines, clay pots, and what may or may not be a goat-powered stirrer. It looks like something Daedalus might have built during a sugar high. A sign hangs from it, written in what appears to be grape syrup, "Grape juice vibration chamber dew." Not lick. You stare at it. He nods. "I read somewhere that if you agitate a liquid just right, add air, keep it cool, sing to it, tit fizzes, bubbles tingles on the tongue. Imagine juice that sparkles." This may or may not be real science. Historians still argue whether ancient peoples had access to natural carbonation techniques, like letting juice ferment just enough to catch wild fizz without tipping into full wine. The Greeks weren't exactly bottling Perrier, but they did have a sense of texture and taste. Dionysus, though, he's vibing on instinct. He lowers a jug of grape juice into the contraption and begins singing to it softly. The melody is oddly beautiful, somewhere between lullaby and sea shanty, with lyrics that mostly go, "Bubble, bubble, don't be trouble." You take a seat on a sun-warmed rock and watch the chaos unfold. One sailor, clearly intrigued, joins in, thumping rhythm on an empty olive barrel. Another starts blowing into a reed flute with the enthusiasm of someone who's never been asked to stop. Within minutes, the grove has turned into a sleepy, low-stakes music festival. Someone tries to name it Juicyapalooza. Dionysus shuts that down immediately. "Too obvious," he says. "We need something subtle, something poetic, like the stillness sparkles." You nod supportively. You're not entirely sure what's in the air today. Magic, dried basil. But everything feels slow, golden, and slightly effervescent. Even the tortoise has started dancing. Sort of as the first batch finishes bubbling, Dionysus uncorks a small jug and pours the tiniest stream into a coconut cup. He sniffs it, swirls it, licks a drop off his finger. "Success," he whispers, eyes wide. He passes you the cup. You sip, it's cold light, a little fizzy, just enough to make your tongue hum and your eyebrows raise. You turn to Dionysus and say the only thing you can think of. It tickles. He laughs, delighted. "Exactly." The sailors swarm like bees to a jam jar. Cups are passed. Elbows jostle. There's even a small cheer when someone spills a little and tries to lap it off the sand. That guy is gently escorted to a nap hammock. It's official. The juice has evolved. Somewhere in the background, a sailor with a scroll and a very large Quill is writing something called the Sparkling Chronicles. He's already on chapter 3. It's mostly metaphors. As Dionysus soaks in the praise, he starts muttering again. If bubbles work, what else? Juice cycles, juice stew, juice perfume. He stops and sniffs his wrist. Okay, maybe. Not that one. Here's your history nugget of the night. The Greeks had a surprisingly refined palate for their time. They categorized wines by region, aging, aroma, even seasonal moods. While juice never reached that status. There was awareness of subtle flavors and how to alter them with herbs, temperature, and time. Dionysus, it turns out, might have been the prototype food chemist. You and he sit beneath a lemon tree, unrelated to the grape operation, but emotionally supportive, sipping gently fizzing juice and watching the world not fall apart. For once, the gods aren't arguing. No monsters are clawing up from the sea. The most dangerous thing nearby is a bee who's too lazy to sting. I'm starting to think this is my true legacy. Dionysus murmurs, not madness, not revelry, but micro-bubbles. You raise your cup to subtle chaos. He grins. To sparkling tranquility. Another sailor appears, hair full of leaves, and asks if Dionysus can sign his cup. Dionysus pulls out a stick of charcoal and scrawls what might be a signature, or possibly just a sleepy-looking grape. It doesn't matter. The sailor walks off. Beaming. Over by the grove, someone builds a juice stand out of driftwood and seashells. It features a sign that reads Godly Juice, Limited Edition. Underneath, smaller print. No refunds. All sales final. Also free. Evening arrives without warning. A soft golden haze drips from the sky like melted honey. The grove sways gently in the breeze. Grapes glisten. Dionysus sighs. Tomorrow, he says, we try pairing it with cheese. You don't even blink. Somewhere nearby, a sailor plays a slow, off-key lullaby on a lyre made from shoelaces and fish bones. The juice sparkles in your cup, soft fizz whispering like a secret. And just as your eyes begin to close, Dionysus leans over, completely serious, and asks, "What if we make it blue?" You blink at Dionysus, trying to process the last thing he said. "Blue," you repeat, as if your ears need a moment to catch up. Dionysus nods solemnly. Yes, the people demand something bold, revolutionary. A juice that's not just a beverage, but an idea. You glance around at the people, most of whom are napping in hammocks or using grape leaves as eye masks. One sailor is arguing gently with a tree stump. There is, as far as you can tell, zero actual demand for blue juice, but you've learned by now, never question a god with a vision. Before you can reply, Dionysus is off, shouting names of plants that might turn juice blue. Cornflower, butterfly, pea, maybe squid ink. No, wait. That's more of a seafood situation. You trail behind him, past vines and wild herbs, into the shady part of the island where the ground feels soft and secretive. The kind of place where strange berries grow and rabbits hold silent. Judgmental council meetings. Here's a fun fact to ponder as you push leaves out of your face. Ancient Greeks used a surprisingly wide palette of natural colorants in food and drink, while blue was rare thanks to the scarcity of stable, edible blue pigments. It wasn't entirely unknown. Some believed that the right flower steeped in wine could yield a haunting violet tint. Historians still argue whether those legends referred to real recipes or were just wishful drinking. Dionysus squats next to a patch of glowing blue flowers that definitely weren't there yesterday. Found it, he whispers. You have no idea how, you don't ask. You've learned. He plucks a few petals and drops them into a fresh jug of juice. The color doesn't change immediately, so he stares at it very hard, as if sheer intensity will coax the magic out. Then slowly the liquid shifts. It's subtle at first. A soft lavender haze creeps through the deep purple. Then, like the sky before a storm, it tilts toward indigo. Not quite blue, but close enough to make your eyebrows go up. Dionysus squeals. We've done it. He lifts the jug high. The filtered sunlight catches it, setting the liquid aglow with a bluish shimmer that looks exactly like the kind of potion someone would try to sell in a suspicious back alley of Athens. A nearby sailor, drawn by the noise, stumbles over. He squints at the jug. That juice looks haunted. Dionysus claps him on the back. It's avant-garde. The sailor stares. Does it still taste like grapes? Dionysus looks genuinely hurt. Of course it does, with notes of sky. The sailor sips. He doesn't fall over. He actually smiles. Tastes like clouds, but like wet. Dionysus beams like a proud parent. Yes, that's what I was going for. You take a sip yourself. It's chilled, fragrant, slightly floral, less grape-forward than the original, but strangely comforting, like drinking a memory of twilight, another quirky tidbit for your collection. In some mystery cults, especially those vaguely tied to Dionysian rites, color was considered spiritually significant. A blue-hued liquid might have symbolized the heavens, the unknown, or the boundary between dream and reality. Which feels fitting, because right now you're pretty sure none of this is entirely real and you're okay with that. Back at the grove, the blue juice is an instant sensation. Cups are passed with exaggerated reverence. Sailors toast to the sea in a cup. One sailor makes a wreath out of the leftover blue petals and declares himself king of juice and small birds. He is immediately ignored. Dionysus lounges beneath his favorite fig tree, swirling his creation like a sommelier-turned sorcerer. This is the future. Forget wine. Forget sparkling. We're talking full-color spectrum beverages. Next, maybe green. Please don't, you say. But he's already halfway into the foliage, whispering to a bush. He pauses, then turns back. A bit more serious now. You know, in a world full of sharp thing swords, laws, sandals with straps that never stay tied, there's something powerful about softness. About sweetness. About giving people a moment of calm. He swirls his cup again. Juice won't change the world, but maybe it changes an hour. That's still something. You sit beside him, watching the grove sway. Above you, the clouds shift into shapes you'll forget in 5 minutes. Across the clearing, a group of sailors has built a juice pyramid out of empty cups. It collapses in slow motion, and nobody's upset. Somewhere behind you, the blue juice jug is singing. Or maybe that's just your brain on grape fumes. Hey, Dionysus says suddenly, do you think the other gods would like this? You try to picture Zeus sipping grape juice, or Ares trying to make it more extreme, or Hermes turning it into a business. Honestly, you're not sure they'd understand. You think they'll laugh. He asks, you shake your head. They'll roll their eyes, then drink all of it. He laughs, quiet and tired and completely satisfied. The last rays of sunlight flicker through the vines. A few sailors have started painting tiny murals on palm leaf scenes of grape presses. Smiling gods, and one extremely abstract turtle. Dionysus looks out at all of it, his expression soft. "This," he says, "might be the best mistake I've ever made." You nod. You've invented a drink, yes, but maybe accidentally. You've also invented peace. By the next morning, the island feels different, quieter, somehow, like even the trees have decided to sleep in. A faint breeze tousles the grapevines, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of toasted bread and ambition. You stretch, stepping over 3 coconuts, 1 empty goblet, and what might be someone's sandal button-nosed as a pillow. The grape juice party of yesterday has left behind a dreamy sort of aftermath. No hangovers, this is still juice territory, but definitely an aura of we did something odd. Dionysus is already up, of course. He's stacking jugs in a line along the beach, labeling each with things like classic, bubble trouble, and blue mood. He hums as he works, occasionally tasting from one and declaring it emotionally round. You watch him for a while before he notices you. "Oh good," he says. "You're up. We have a situation." You sigh. "Please, don't say war." "No," he says, eyes twinkling. "It's worse. Hermes is coming." You blink. Hermes, messenger of the gods, champion of chaos, patron of travelers, thieves, and anyone who's ever tried to sneak snacks into a temple. Why? I may have accidentally sent him a grape-scented scroll yesterday. Dionysus shrugs. You know. Just to brag a little. And just like that, the air shifts. Somewhere far off, a seagull lets out a startled squawk. Moments later, a streak of gold zips through the sky and lands very theatrically on a pile of sand near the juice stand. It's Hermes, of course, cloak fluttering, winged sandals glowing faintly. He's chewing something, probably stolen, and grinning like he's already 3 steps ahead of you in every conversation you're about to have. "Well, well, well," he says, brushing imaginary dust off his tunic. "I hear someone's gone domestic." Dionysus gives a graceful bow. "Welcome to Juice Island. Would you like a tour?" Hermes takes a sniff of the air, eyes narrowing. "Is that blue?" You hand him a cup. He drinks, stares at it, drinks again. "What is this?" he asks, stunned. "Peace." Dionysus says dramatically. Here's a historical tidbit to file away. Hermes and Dionysus actually did share a few cultic connections in ancient Greece. Though their domains were wildly different, speed versus excess, they were both liminal gods, meaning they hovered around thresholds, doors, borders, transitions, the weird space between logic and dreams. Some fringe scholars even argue they were different faces of the same kind of archetype, the charming rule-breaker. In this moment, Hermes looks equal parts amused and impressed. It's good, he admits. Like nectar, but with a twist of nap. Dionysus glows. It's restorative, subtle, digestible in dream form. Hermes waves a hand. You sound like a fig salesman. What's the real catch? Dionysus leans in. There is none. That's the point. Hermes tilts his head. But why? You almost laugh. The god of hustle can't compute leisure. Juice, without an ulterior motive. Heresy. Dionysus just shrugs. Not everything has to conquer. Some things just soothe. Hermes sits down on the nearest log, which someone has embroidered with tiny grapes. He stares out at the grove. "You're serious," he says slowly. "You really just made a beverage, and now you're building what? A juice empire?" "No empire," Dionysus says. "Just a moment." And just like that, Hermes is quiet. For the first time since landing, he sips his juice and watches the waves. You sit beside them both, letting the lull of the ocean lull your own thoughts into syrup. After a while, Hermes speaks again. "You know," he says, "the other gods are going to mock this." Dionysus snorts. "Let them. They mocked me for sleeping in a tree that one time too." "Which tree?" "The one with the squirrels." "Don't change the subject." Hermes smiles. "I'm not mocking. I'm thinking." And now you do get nervous, because Hermes thinking usually means someone else's barn is about to catch fire. He taps a finger to his temple. "What if we exported it?" "No," Dionysus says flatly. Hermes raises an eyebrow. "I'm serious," Dionysus says. "This isn't a product. It's an accident, a mood. You don't ship moods. You sip them under the stars." Hermes lets out a slow whistle. "That's dangerously poetic. You've been reading scrolls again?" But Dionysus isn't budging. You decide to break the tension by offering Hermes a second flavor. He picks bubble, trouble, and immediately starts brainstorming slogans like "Pop open paradise," and "For when nectar just isn't enough." Despite everything, it's clear that Hermes is enchanted. He spends the rest of the afternoon flitting around the grove, trying all the flavors, interviewing sleepy sailors, and suggesting aggressive marketing strategies like Juice Olympics. And the grape awakening, Dionysus tolerates it. Barely, but there's a new twinkle in his eye, to a kind of wary amusement. As if even he knows that once Hermes gets involved, the juice might no longer belong just to this sleepy island. Here's a quirky detail to savor, in some lost plays and fragments. Dionysus was depicted not just as a wild party god, but as a sort of divine trickster with a soft center. One who delighted in disarming warlords with sweetness or turning enemies into friends via food and song. Historians still debate whether this was satire or sincere character development, but here, in this moment, it feels absolutely true. As twilight falls, the three of you sit on the beach, sipping quietly. Hermes, now calmer than you've ever seen him, stretches his legs and sighs. "I'm staying the night," he says. "This place isn't loud enough to leave." Dionysus nods. "We have extra hammocks. They smell like citrus." No one talks for a while. A few stars blink awake above, and just as you're starting to drift off, Hermes mutters, "Next time though, let's make it spicy." By morning, Hermes has made himself very at home. You find him wearing someone else's tunic, reclined in a makeshift cabana built from driftwood and grapevines. He's surrounded by a semicircle of empty juice cups and a few scribbled scrolls that read things like brand expansion, from cup to cosmos and target demographics, mortals, minor gods, and cool birds. Dionysus watches from the shade of his fig tree, munching a pomegranate, like a man who knows exactly how this ends, and is emotionally prepared to lose the battle in style. "Why are there 10 new flavors already?" he asks, voice flat. Hermes stretches innovation, also boredom. Also, you left the fruit cart unattended. You peer into the juice row. There's a cucumber twilight, a sage citrus fog, and something called ambrosia light that smells faintly like ambition and honey. Have you even tested these? You ask. I test with my soul, Hermes replies. Dionysus groans. Still, the new flavors are weirdly good. You sample cucumber twilight, and are immediately transported to the sensation of leaning your head out a train window during a cool dusk. Whatever that means. The point is, it's refreshing. One of the sailors walks by, sipping a pinkish cup labeled Dawn Sweat. You decide not to ask as the sun rises. You all gather under the central vine arch, what has now become the de facto juice pavilion. Sailors have begun tying grape-colored flags to the trees. One of them has crafted a wooden sign that reads, "Welcome to Viniopolis." Dionysus winces. I didn't authorize a name, he says. Neither did history. Hermes grins. But it always names you anyway. Here's something real. In some lesser-known festivals to Dionysus, particularly rural Dionysia celebrations, the juice or wine wasn't just for drinking, it played a role in ceremonial mock trials, comedic plays, and even informal courtships. People took a sip, then confessed their dreams, or their worst poems, or proposed marriage to someone they'd only met 5 minutes ago. Juice, in a very ancient way, was truth serum with better taste. And that's exactly what begins happening. Here, the longer people stay on the island, the more they start saying things they wouldn't normally say. Like the sailor who admits he's always wanted to be a sculptor. Or the cook who confesses her dream of baking a pie so good it makes a cyclops weep. Or Hermes, who mutters half-asleep that sometimes he wishes he had a different job. One with less sprinting. Maybe involving flowers. Even Dionysus begins to soften. This wasn't supposed to be a whole thing. He mumbles one night, lying back in a net hammock that smells like crushed rosemary. I was just playing with fruit. You glance at the grove, now lit with lanterns made from hollowed pomegranates and glowing moss. A group of sailors is practicing synchronized cup pouring. Someone is composing a juice-based hymn. Viniopolis hums with gentle absurdity. But that's what makes it good, you say. It wasn't planned. Dionysus smiles, eyes half closed. Yeah, accidents always taste better. There's a pause. Then he adds, still, Hermes is going to ruin it. And that's when you notice it. A new set of sails on the horizon. Not trader sails, not fishermen. These are crisp, official, glimmering slightly in the morning sun. The kind of sails that only come from Mount Olympus itself. Dionysus squints. Oh no, he told someone. You turn slowly to Hermes, who is now dressed in something suspiciously velvet, holding a clipboard with the phrase "Regional Distribution Zones" scribbled in gold ink. He looks up. What? Dionysus groans into his cup. The Olympians are coming. Let's pause here to note something fringe but fascinating. Some fragments from the Orphic texts suggest that the gods were not just amused by Dionysus's inventions, they were annoyed. Specifically because his creations like theater, fermentation, and maybe even sweet drinks had a tendency to distract mortals from fear, war, and blind loyalty. In other words, Dionysus didn't just invent fun, he invented dangerous fun. Historians still argue whether the other gods were ever genuinely threatened by this, or just embarrassed when they enjoyed it too much. Back in Viniopolis, The preparations begin. You, Dionysus, and a reluctant Hermes start tidying the grove. Empty cups are collected. Strange flavors are tucked out of sight. Someone is tasked with calming the juice jugs, which have developed a habit of singing lullabies at random. A delegation arrives by noon. First comes Apollo, shining smug, shirtless as always, followed by Athena, crisp and unreadable, and then Ares, who looks like he was promised a battle, but is settling for brunch. Zeus isn't here yet. Thank the grapes. Dionysus rises to greet them, juice cup in hand. Welcome to my grove, he says with a bow. We're not a cult. Athena raises an eyebrow. That's exactly what a cult would say. Apollo's already sniffing the air. Something smells like joy. Hermes tries to casually block the flavor rack labeled emotions in a cup. Ares immediately drinks the darkest one and mutters, tastes like war after therapy. Apollo, meanwhile, is enthralled. He downs a glass of sunset whisper, and declares it the drink of the gods. Literally, Athena tries one labeled, Olive you forever. Her face barely changes, but she finishes the cup. Even Ares seems to relax a bit, but Dionysus watches it all with a nervous edge. He knows what's coming, because when gods enjoy something, they don't just applaud it. They appropriate it. Sure. Enough. Apollo is already talking about bottling it for muses. Athena wants a lab to study the flavor-memory connection. Ares suggests a juice-based combat training program called Grape juice. Dionysus slumps onto a log. This is why we can't have nice things. He sighs. You pat him on the back. Hey, you say, it's still your juice. He shakes his head. Not for long. They'll rebrand it, overthink it, ruin the mystery. And for the first time, you see what he's really afraid of. Not that his juice will be stolen, but that it'll be understood. And once something is understood by the gods, it usually becomes a weapon. It starts slowly. A few scribes from Olympus arrive, carrying feather pens and scrolls. They begin cataloging flavor notes, gathering testimonies from juice-drunk sailors, and drawing terribly inaccurate diagrams of the juice fermentation arc, from grape to godhood. One of them interviews a pigeon, mistaking it for a local sage Hermes. Now back in salesman mode, is giving founder talks under a palm tree. He's wearing a laurel crown made of mint leaves. His presentation includes words like synergy, cross-domain offerings, and something horrifying called ambronization. Dionysus, meanwhile, has gone quiet. He spends most of his time walking through the vines, touching the leaves like they might disappear if he looks away. The grove is still beautiful, but something's different. Polished, curated. The juice pavilion now has velvet ropes and a tasting queue. Even the juice feels less dreamy, a little more logical. You sip from a newly approved flavor, Apollo's Emberand. It tastes technically perfect, but not magical, like it was designed by a committee of well-fed sphinxes. And maybe that's the problem. Here's your historical fact for this moment. The real Dionysian writes the mystery festivals were never fully written down. Scholars still argue whether this was because the rituals were sacred, secret, or just too weird to capture on scrolls. Most of what we know comes from dramatic plays and angry rants by early Christians. But the consistent thread is that the rites were never meant to be understood. They were meant to transform, and you can't mass produce a transformation. Back in the grove, the signs of Olympusification grow louder. Athena has begun testing flavor effects on mortal dreams. Apollo is commissioning bards to write epic odes to the hero's hydration arc. Ares now hosts combat drills where warriors drink grapple juice and then try to hug their opponents into submission. Even Artemis, who wasn't invited, shows up one morning and declares Moonberry Nocturne her new personal brand Dionysus. He's fading, not literally, but emotionally. He's present, yes, but only in the way a half-eaten fig is present at a feast. He leans against trees and watches everything with a glassy, melancholy sort of fondness. You sit beside him one night, under a sky smeared with stars and diluted ambition. They're sterilizing it, he says. You nod. It was supposed to be silly, he says. A mistake. A joy accident. He takes a sip of classic original, one of the few untouched jugs. His eyes close. And now it's got an instruction manual. A breeze moves through the vines. Somewhere nearby, a group of interns is attempting to quantify mouthfeel using a unit of measurement called siptrons. Quirky tidbit incoming. A rarely discussed cult of Dionysus in ancient Thrace used drink, not to celebrate, but to forget. They believed the juice could help erase painful memories if mixed with the right herbs and consumed during a lunar eclipse. Historians still argue whether these were primitive psychologists or just deeply committed to blackout recipes. Here, on this island, you wonder if Dionysus would like to forget this entire week. And then things get worse. One morning Zeus arrives. No fanfare, no trumpet of thunder. He just walks in from the sea, dripping with seawater, holding a goblet that seems to shimmer between liquid and lightning. The grove goes still. Even Hermes fumbles his pitch scroll. Zeus takes a sip from Dionysus's personal jug, no permission asked. He swishes it in his mouth like a wine critic on Mount Snob. Then he nods. It's acceptable, he says. And just like that, it's official. The juice has been blessed, which means it now belongs to Olympus. Immediately, Hermes launches Operation Nectar 2.0, complete with branding scrolls, team chants, and something called the juice board. Apollo plans a concert tour. Athena wants to create a standardized mythos to control the storytelling. Even the trees start getting optimized, grafted, reshaped, harvested for maximum yield. Dionysus disappears for 3 days. Nobody notices you do, of course. You're the only one still sipping the original juice. The last flavor that tastes like rain on hot dirt, like laughter in a storm, like a nap on an unfamiliar couch that somehow fits your body perfectly. You find him eventually up on the far cliff of the island where the vines don't grow and the sea slams hard against the rocks. He's not in his usual robes, just a thin tunic and bare feet. He doesn't say anything for a long time. Then, I wanted to give people a break from their gods, he says. You blink. Most gods, he continues, want attention, obedience, big shiny temples. I just wanted to give them something that didn't ask anything. A wave crashes below. They ruined it, he finishes. You sit beside him. Say nothing for a while. Just let the sea fill the silence with its old angry music. And then quietly you say, it's not over. He turns to look at you. We've still got the recipe. His eyes narrow. You want to start over. You nod. New island, new vines, no scrolls. He considers this. I'll need olives, he says finally. and fewer interns. Here's the weirdest part. There's an obscure myth fragment found on a broken pottery shard near Delphi that references a second garden planted by Dionysus far from Olympus. A secret place where he grew the taste of laughter once more. Most historians dismiss it as poetic nonsense. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe this is that moment. Dionysus stands, wipes sea mist from his face. "All right," he says, "let's find some seeds." And just like that, the god of revelry, rebirth, and spontaneous beverages begins again. Not for power, not for Olympus, just for the joy of accident. You leave the grove at dawn. There's no ceremony, no announcements. Just you, Dionysus, and a canvas sack of grape seeds tucked under one arm, slipping out past the velvet ropes while Hermes distracts the Olympians with a new pitch called sky juice. Now with lightning. You pass by the juice pavilion, now trimmed with gold, staffed by chorus girls, and advertising a limited-time flavor blessed by Poseidon himself. Ares is training interns to weaponize carbonation. Athena is leading a symposium titled The Philosophy of Fizz. You don't look back. You and Dionysus hike inland, then to the other side of the island, where the forest thickens and the trails stop pretending to be trails. No juice carts here. No branded goblets. Just moss, stone, and the sound of your breath syncing with the rhythm of someone walking away from everything. Here's your historical breadcrumb for this leg of the story. The cult of Dionysus often thrived outside the city walls. They performed in forests, on mountaintops, or underground anywhere the gods weren't expected to go. Historians still argue whether this was a strategy of rebellion or just a necessity. Since Dionysus didn't like being supervised, the climb gets steep. Your legs ache. Dionysus doesn't complain. He's humming a slow minor tune that sounds like something a satyr might sing to a sleeping bear. Eventually, you reach it, the other cliff, smaller, lonelier, and gloriously untouched. From here, you can see the whole island behind you, Vinyapolis, in all its glittering absurdity. The sails of Olympus's ships dotting the shoreline like gleaming teeth, and ahead, ocean endless, shimmering unbranded Dionysus, crouches down and digs a little hole in the earth. He places one of the seeds inside, then another. Then he pauses. "We're going to need more than juice," he says. You nod, snacks. He grins. A whole myth. Now, here's a fringe detail you probably haven't heard. Some ancient amphorythos. Big clay jars have been discovered with inscriptions that suggest experimental flavor blending. Like fig honey rose or mint pintamarisk. These weren't commercial. These were personal. One scholar calls them edible poems. Another says they were never meant for anyone but the gods to taste. But Dionysus, he liked to share, so that's the plan. You and Dionysus begin crafting not just a juice, but a feeling, the flavor of forbidden. Napped, the sip that tastes like a song you forgot you loved, the kind of grape that never gets picked by greedy gods. You don't rush. You wait for the rain to come. You use moonlight to guide your planting. You talk to the vines, like they're old friends returning from war. And as the grove starts to grow again, wild and defiantly unstructured, you realize something comforting. This one doesn't need a name. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Back in Vinyapolis, things are ... Peaking, Zeus has launched a new initiative, to install a juice station on every Olympus cloud. Hermes is recruiting demigods to serve as regional ambassadors. One of the flavor's golden rinds trending in both mortal and underworld markets. And yet, something's missing. The magic's dulled. The early Bacchesta ones that made people laugh or cry for no reason don't taste quite the same anymore. Apollo tries to play a song about it. But even his lyre sounds uncertain. Athena orders a team to recreate the original formula, but their calculations keep turning up incomplete. Historians still argue whether divine flavor can be reverse-engineered. Spoiler, it can't. Meanwhile, word of a hidden grove begins to spread. Whispers among dryads, songs from wandering nymphs. Sailors claiming they once tasted a new kind of juice, deeply purple, slightly fizzy, and capable of making you forget your worst mistake for exactly 7 minutes. Zeus scoffs at the rumors. Hermes pretends not to care. Apollo tries to copyright the phrase "purple haze of the heart." But something stirs, because the thing about joy is, it spreads quietly, like ivy, or gossip, or a giggle in the back of a classroom, and you've become part of the story. You and Dionysus now hold midnight tastings for creatures who can't go to Olympus bars. Cyclopes who want to talk about dreams. Harpies who like poetry. That one satyr who's trying to be celibate. Not going well. You serve from handmade cups. There's no menu. You don't charge anything. Instead, you ask a simple question. What do you want to feel? And then Dionysus brews that. He calls it amethyst. You try to convince him to change the name. He does not. Here's your scholarly debate for the moment. Some mythologists argue that Dionysus wasn't just a god of wine or madness or parties, but a god of permission. The permission to feel, to fall apart, to be ridiculous and vulnerable, and over the top in a world obsessed with control. And what you're doing now, it feels like permission incarnate. One night, after serving juice to a satyr couple celebrating their anniversary 15 years, 4 goats, and 1 legally adopted river eel, Dionysus pulls you aside. There's a storm coming, he says. You tilt your head. The sky's clear. No, he says, not a weather one, an Olympus one. They're getting jealous. And sure enough, the next day, you spot sails on the horizon again. Only this time, they're coming for you. The sails cut through the morning haze like polished knives. You and Dionysus watch from the cliff, the hidden grove humming quietly behind you, vines twisting toward the sun in their slow, rebellious dance. The newcomers are different this time. Not the usual Olympian entourage with laurel wreaths and scrolls. No, these are more formal robes, trimmed with gold thread, expressions like they've seen too many banquet halls, and not enough laughter. At their head is Hera, not the warm, if stern goddess you might expect. Today, she's sharp, like a blade. Wrapped in silk. You think you can hide from Olympus? She asks, voice calm but icy. Dionysus folds his arms. We're not hiding, we're evolving. Hera steps closer. You're defying order, tradition, the divine hierarchy. You glance at the vines, wild, unruly, bursting with color and sound, and wonder if tradition ever meant much to Dionysus. Or if he's just been rewriting the rules all along. Here's your mainstream fact for this moment. Hera was often portrayed as the goddess of marriage and fidelity. But in many myths, she also acted as the enforcer of divine law, particularly when the gods or mortals stepped out of line. Historians still argue whether her actions were motivated by jealousy, justice, or something more political. Hera's entourage unfurls a scrolled decree from Zeus, no less mandating the immediate cessation of all unauthorized juice production. We cannot allow rogue divinity to undermine Olympus, she declares. Dionysus sighs, and you catch the faintest flicker of amusement in his eyes. Rogue divinity, huh? That's a new one. You've always been rogue, Hera replies. But now you've gone too far. The tension is thick enough to cut with a Thyrsus staff. Then something unexpected happens. Hermes appears snapping his winged sandals like a nervous metronome carrying a basket filled with your emetaste juice. Ladies, gentlemen, and divine bureaucrats, he begins, voice overly cheerful. Before you condemn, may I offer a taste? The crowd looks skeptical, but curiosity wins. Hera sniffs the drink, eyes narrowing. She takes a sip, then another. The silence that follows is palpable. You hold your breath. Hera's face softens just a bit. It's interesting, she admits, though the word sounds grudging. Dionysus smiles, a slow, victorious curve of his lips. You see, he says, this juice doesn't just fill cups. It fills something else. The part of us that's tired of the same old order. Hermes grins. Plus, it pairs well with ambrosia. The bureaucrats murmur, but Hera's expression hardens again. Your rebellion threatens balance, she warns. The gods maintain order so mortals may thrive. You think about that, about order, balance, and the strange unpredictable joy that juice has sparked. It's not neat, it's not orderly, it's messy, it's human. You realize that's exactly why it's dangerous. But Dionysus, he's ready. We won't stop, he says firmly. Because joy isn't chaos, it's necessary. Ares steps forward, cracking his knuckles. I'm with Dionysus on this one. Sometimes order needs a little ... flexing. Apollo hums an approving tune. Athena, ever the strategist, folds her arms thoughtfully. The council murmurs, torn between outrage and intrigue. Here's a quirky fact. Ancient Dionysian festivals sometimes involved controlled chaos, wild dances, ecstatic frenzies, and ritual madness. Some scholars argue these rites were early forms of social catharsis, a way for communities to blow off steam and reset. Historians still debate whether this was purely spiritual or also political. As the tension eases, Hera issues a reluctant compromise. Dionysus may continue his Grovonder strict guidelines, and with Olympus's oversight, Dionysus laughs. A sound like breaking chains. Fine, but no velvet ropes. No scrolls. Hera nods, a trace of a smile betraying her seriousness. You realize this is a new chapter not just for Dionysus, but for all of Olympus, because sometimes, even gods need a reminder that joy doesn't fit into neat boxes, and sometimes, the best rebellions start with a simple sip. The tension fades like a half-remembered dream. But the island feels different now, if it's holding its breath, waiting for what comes next. Dionysus claps you on the back, grinning like a kid who just won a grape stomping contest. Looks like we're officially unofficial, he says. You laugh, imagining the paperwork Olympus will draft just to keep tabs on the juice. Maybe a scroll stamped in triplicate, signed by a bored nymph. You wander through the grove, now part sanctuary, part secret clubhouse. The vines have started to grow taller, thicker, bursting with the promise of a new harvest. Here's your mainstream historical nugget. Ancient Greek agriculture was deeply tied to religious festivals, especially those honoring Dionysus. Grapevines weren't just plants, they were symbols of life's cycles, death, and rebirth. Scholars still debate the extent to which these rituals influenced early viticulture, but this time, the harvest feels different. Less about power, more about play. You and Dionysus host late-night tastings under the stars, inviting creatures from myths and mortals alike, fauns with gleaming eyes, poets chasing elusive inspiration, even the occasional disheveled hero looking for a moment's peace. The juice flows freely, laughter bubbling up like the fizzy nectar itself. One night, a satyr raises his cup and says, "This tastes like a second chance." You realize he's right. You think back to those first accidental sips, the unfiltered joy of discovery. Understand this new juice captures that spirit. It's not about perfection, it's about possibility. A quirky tidbit: some ancient wine jars have been found with traces of herbs like mint and thyme, suggesting that early vintners experimented with flavor long before modern winemaking. This botanical creativity was part art, part medicine, part magic. As the grove grows, so do the stories. You hear whispers of a new festival, one without rigid rituals or hierarchies, just music, dance, and endless cups raised in celebration of the unexpected. Historians still argue whether such festivals existed or are romanticized myths, but you don't care. You feel it in your bones. One evening, Dionysus pulls you aside. "There's something you need to know," he says, voice low and serious. You brace yourself. "I wasn't always the god of wine and revelry," he admits. "There was a time before all that, a time when I was just a boy, curious and clumsy, who loved grapes more than power." You nod, encouraging him to continue. "That boy never left," he says. "He's still here, hiding in the juice." You smile. Maybe that's why the juice tastes like laughter and mistakes, because it's not just drink, it's memory. And maybe, you think, that's the real magic. You and Dionysus sit beneath the stars, the grove alive with gentle sounds, rustle of leaves, distant laughter, the soft clink of cups. No velvet ropes, no scrolls, just the endless unfolding story of joy. The next morning, the grove is drenched in golden light. You wake up to the sweet scent of ripening grapes and the soft hum of bees buzzing their ancient songs as you stretch. You notice something odd, a faint glow surrounding one cluster of grapes, almost like they're whispering secrets to the sun. You reach out, touch a grape, and it feels warm, like a tiny sun trapped in your palm. Dionysus appears beside you, eyes twinkling. "Those are the first of the sun-kissed grapes," he says. "A little experiment, a little accident." You laugh. Accidents seem to follow him around like faithful hounds. This is a perfect moment for a historical fact. Ancient Greek farmers used selective breeding and grafting techniques to improve grape varieties long before modern genetics. The success of vineyards often depended on these agricultural experiments. Historians still debate how much of this was trial and error versus intentional science. Dionysus explains that the sun-kissed grapes are a blend of wild and cultivated varieties, created to catch more sunlight and carry an unexpected sparkle in the juice. You wonder if this sparkle is what makes some people laugh for no reason after a sip or cry because a song suddenly feels like it's about them. Dionysus nods knowingly. It's not just juice. It's a story. You wander deeper into the grove, the air thick with possibility. Suddenly, you hear a rustle. Out steps a small figure, cloaked and hooded. Who goes there? You ask, half expecting a nymph or a mischievous sprite. The figure pulls back the hood, revealing a young woman with curious eyes and a mischievous grin. I'm Thalia, she says. One of the muses. You blink. Thalia, the muse of comedy and idyllic poetry of all the nine. She seems the most likely to crash a secret juice party. You're just in time, Dionysus says. We're crafting something new. Thalia smiles, eyes sparkling. I hear you're brewing more than just juice, something to make people feel. That's right, you say. We're mixing laughter and memories. Thalia laughs softly. Well, I can help with that. Comedy needs a muse, after all. You notice she carries a small lyre, strings shimmering with magic. As she begins to play, the grove seems to pulse in rhythm. The grapes glow brighter. You feel the juice within them stirring, waiting to be released. Here's a quirky detail. Ancient muses weren't just inspiration for artists, but were believed to actively influence emotions and even physical healing. Some scholars suggest their myths reflect early understanding of the psychological power of art and joy. Historians still debate how literal these influences were thought to be. The grove becomes a symphony, place where juice and music merge, weaving joy into every drop. You realize this is more than an invention, it's an awakening. One sip of this juice could lift burdens, spark laughter, or turn a stranger into a friend. And as Thalia plays, you feel it's the soft, warm pulse of possibility. Because sometimes, the best stories aren't just told, they're tasted as days blur into nights. The grove becomes a sanctuary, a place where time stretches and contracts. Like a lazy river, you watch as visitors arrive, a weary centaur seeking solace, a chorus of dryads humming lullabies, even a philosopher looking for a break from his endless questions. Each receives a cup of juice tailored not just to taste, but to mood, a sip that might inspire courage, calm, or just a goofy grin. One evening, as twilight paints the sky in shades of purple, you catch Dionysus staring at the horizon. Trouble? You ask. He shrugs. Always. But sometimes trouble tastes sweeter. Here's a historical tidbit. Greek myths often depict Dionysus as a god who blurred boundaries between human and divine, order and chaos, reason and madness. This duality has fascinated scholars for centuries, and historians still debate whether he was worshipped more for his life-affirming joy, or his chaotic disruption. Suddenly, the ground trembles, a distant rumble that grows louder. The ocean roars. You look up to see a massive wave, rising like a glass mountain. From the depths emerges Poseidon himself. Trident gleaming eyes, fierce. Dionysus, Poseidon booms. Your juice stirs the seas. Dionysus steps forward calmly. Not the juice, old friend. The joy. Poseidon narrows his eyes. Your joy threatens my domain. Mortals are forgetting respect for the ocean. You step between them. Maybe they just need to feel connected again. Poseidon's gaze softens just a bit. You're treading dangerous waters, he warns. But perhaps this is a tide worth riding. A quirky fringe fact. Ancient Greeks believed that emotions could affect the natural world, storms brewing with anger or calm seas following peace. Some rituals aimed to appease gods by balancing these forces. Historians still debate how literal these connections were believed to be. You sense an uneasy truce forming. The grove feels alive with tension and possibility. Dionysus raises his cup. Two unexpected alliances. Poseidon nods, lifting his trident. The juice sparkles in the fading light. You realize the story is far from over, and that sometimes, even gods need to learn how to share joy without losing control. The days stretch longer, the grove humming with life and laughter, but beneath the surface, something shifts, a slow, quiet pressure, like the earth itself is holding a secret. You walk among the vines, fingers brushing against the thick leaves that shimmer faintly in the sun. The grapes glow with a soft purple light, as if they're storing tiny suns inside. Every step feels heavy with anticipation. The air charged with an energy you can't quite name. Dionysus joins you, holding a small, cracked amphora filled with a newly brewed batch of juice. This one, he says, is different. It's the essence of everything we've learned. Joy, memory, rebellion, and maybe a little bit of the future. You raise an eyebrow. Sounds like quite the mix. He laughs, a sound that echoes softly through the grove like a secret melody. It is. But that's the point. This juice isn't just a drink. It's a story waiting to be told, a feeling waiting to be felt. You take a sip, and the world shifts, colors brighten, sounds sharpen, and for a moment, you feel the pulse of the universe in your veins. Here's your mainstream fact. Ancient Greek amphorae, those iconic two-handled jars, weren't just storage vessels, they were symbols of status and ritual. Some amphorae were intricately painted, telling stories of gods and heroes, while others held precious liquids that defined social gatherings. Historians still argue how much of their value was practical versus symbolic. As you savor the juice, a group of mortals appears at the grove's edge, travelers who've heard whispers of the legendary nectar. Their eyes widen at the sight of the glowing grapes and the intoxicating aroma that drifts through the air like a gentle breeze. Among them is a poet, whose notebook is filled with scribbles and half-formed verses. She approaches cautiously, her voice trembling with awe. Is this the juice of Dionysus? Dionysus smiles warmly. It is, but it's more than that. It's a sip of possibility. The poet accepts a cup, and as she drinks, her eyes sparkle with inspiration. She begins to recite a poem, words flowing like a river, raw, vibrant, and alive. You watch as the grove comes alive with music and laughter. A tapestry of stories woven together by the shared experience of this magical juice. A quirky detail. Some ancient Greek festivals dedicated to Dionysus featured spontaneous performances where poets and actors improvised scenes on the spot. Scholars suggest these events were early forms of interactive theater, blurring the lines between performer and audience. Historians still debate how structured or chaotic these festivals truly were. As night falls, lanterns flicker to life, casting warm glows on faces uplifted in joy. The grove becomes a sanctuary of connection, a place where boundaries dissolve. and the simple act of sharing a drink becomes an act of communion. Dionysus leans in, his voice a soft whisper. This is why we started. Not for power or fame, but for moments like this. You nod, feeling the truth in his words resonate deep within you. Suddenly, a distant rumble shakes the ground, a reminder that even in this haven, the world outside is restless. But here, in this grove, time bends, and joy reigns. And as you look around at the glowing faces, you realize that the story of the juice of Dionysus and all who dare to dreams far from over, it's just beginning. The grove pulses with quiet energy as dawn seeps through the leaves, casting dappled gold across the earth. You're standing near the oldest vine, its gnarled branches twisting like ancient fingers reaching for the sky. The air smells of ripe grapes and soft earth, a scent that's both grounding and oddly exhilarating. Dionysus joins you again, looking both weary and radiant, like he's been up all night, weaving magic from moonlight. It's time, he says simply. You nod, knowing what he means without asking. The juice, the accidental invention that rewrote the rules of Olympus's, ready for its final test. You gather with the circle of gods, mortals, and magical creatures who've become part of this unfolding story. The air buzzes with anticipation, a gentle hum beneath the laughter and clinking cups. Here's your mainstream fact. The ancient Greeks believed that communal drinking was more than just was a sacred act that bound participants together, creating philia, or deep friendship. Scholars still debate how these rituals shaped political and social structures in Greek city-states. Dionysus raises his cup, the juice shimmering with every color of twilight. 2 new beginnings. He toasts, glasses clink. The juice flows, weaving its magic through each soul, sparking laughter, tears, and moments of quiet reflection. You watch as Hera smiles soft, and maybe even a little surprised. The old rivalries seem to melt away under the spell of this simple drink, and you remember the journey, the wild experiments, the tense councils, the accidental brilliance that turned grapes into something transcendent. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ancient wine jars were found with inscriptions hinting at jokes or witty sayings, suggesting that humor and levity were always part of the drinking experience. Historians still debate the origins of these inscriptions. Were they genuine jokes or coded messages? The night deepens, the grove alive with stories and song, and you feel a gentle settling, a peaceful end to the chaos. Historians still argue whether Dionysus's invention was a myth or rooted in real agricultural innovation. But as you sip the juice, you understand it's less about fact and more about feeling. Because sometimes, the greatest inventions aren't what you plan. They're what you accidentally create when you let go. You lean back against the ancient vine, the stars twinkling overhead like knowing eyes, and you know, without a doubt, that joy like this juice was always meant to be shared. The fireflies flicker slower now, the music fades into the hush of the trees, and even the stars seem to dim slightly, as if lowering their voices in respect for the closing of this strange, sleepy chapter. You lie back on a bed of moss, the vines forming a quiet canopy above you, swaying in rhythm with the night's breath. Dionysus has wandered off somewhere, probably off to stir up laughter in another corner of the world, but the juice, the joy, the softness he left behind, it lingers. The grove has become still. Not empty, not silent, just full in a different way. The grapes have stopped glowing. Their work is done for now. You close your eyes and feel the weight of your body ease into the earth beneath you. Every muscle releases. Every noise becomes distant. Even the scent of crushed grapes seems to dissolve into the cool night air. Far off, someone giggles in their sleep, a satyr maybe, or a nymph dreaming of running through fog and fountains. You smile to yourself. The journey here was wild and weird, wrapped in vines and sprinkled with magic. But now, it's slowed to a gentle sway, like the rocking of a hammock under a starry sky. No scrolls to sign, no gods to argue with, just the hush of a grove that holds secrets, and the warmth of a juice that remembers them for you. You exhale, long and slow, as the grove folds itself around you like a soft blanket. Let your limbs go heavy, let the last images fade, let the laughter dissolve into dreams, let the night do the rest. Sweet dreams.